The studio lights blazed down with unforgiving intensity, casting long shadows behind the set's faux comfortable furniture. Tucker Carlson didn't blink. He leaned forward, voice steady, tone dangerously calm. "You used to be funny, Jimmy. What happened?" The air shifted. A sharp intake of breath rippled through the live audience, the kind that says this isn't part of the bit. Jimmy Kimmel, usually quick with a deflection, didn't smile. His fingers tapped the armrest, not in rhythm, but in something that resembled unease. The camera didn't cut away, it lingered, it held. Behind the glass wall of the control room, even the producers stopped barking into headsets. No one had planned for this. No one had a contingency when the guest flips the script and the host is left exposed on his own turf. Kimmel tried to laugh. Just once, short, awkward, it didn't land. And then Tucker said the one thing that no one expected, not even Kimmel. The words didn't come like a headline. They came like a gut punch, like a mirror. And for the first time that night, Jimmy had nothing to say. But to understand how it came to this, we have to go back to the start of the night, when everything looked normal until it wasn't. Scene setting, approx 400 words. It was just past 7:30 p.m. on a Wednesday in Los Angeles, the kind of early evening where the sky burns orange over the hills and studio lots hum with the kind of pre-show energy that hides nerves under a thick layer of routine. Inside the El Capitan Theater, stagehands prepped the set like they had 100 nights before. Cue cards were in place. The mug on the desk was filled just right. Everything was predictable, polished, safe. Jimmy Kimmel walked onto the set a few minutes before taping. He wore a classic black suit, slightly unbuttoned at the collar, California formal. He looked relaxed, but anyone who's watched him closely knows the difference between his TV grin and his real smile. Tonight, it was the former. The night's guest was a surprise, not to the crew, of course, and they'd been briefed. But to the audience tuning in, the name Tucker Carlson was unexpected. Controversial, polarizing, the kind of booking that screamed ratings, stunt to some and reckoning to others. Carlson entered the green room 20 minutes before showtime. No entourage, just him. In a navy blazer that looked like it had weathered some storms, collar slightly worn, a demeanor that didn't match the man Fox News viewers once knew. Since leaving the network, he'd become something else, less polished, more raw, unfiltered, unafraid. He sat quietly, refusing makeup, and watched the show's cold open without expression. When the stage manager gave the 5-minute warning, he stood up, adjusted nothing, and walked to the curtain. Kimmel greeted him on stage with the usual handshake and grin, the audience clapping on cue. The band played its upbeat riff, the lights warmed to their preset tone, and the first few minutes rolled along like any other late-night segment. But there was a thin wire of tension, barely visible, yet undeniably there. A pause between jokes, a missed cue, a look too sharp for television. Jimmy made the first jab, something about Tucker's departure from Fox. The crowd chuckled. Tucker didn't. It was subtle, but for those paying attention, the night had just shifted. Jimmy leaned back in his chair, crossing one leg over the other, mug in hand. "So, Tucker," he began, keeping his tone light but with that familiar edge, "you're not exactly known for playing well with others these days." A few chuckles from the audience, harmless on the surface. But Tucker's lips barely curled into a smile. Tension at first didn't come from anything overt. It lived in the space between their sentences, the way Kimmel avoided eye contact just slightly after each punchline, the way Tucker's replies carried a pause, half-second too long, like he was weighing every word not to avoid offense, but to sharpen impact. "I suppose if you define playing well as parroting the dominant narrative, then sure. I've been a bit difficult," Tucker said, tone flat but eyes sharp. The audience reaction was mixed, polite laughter, a few murmurs, someone in the back clapped once awkwardly. Kimmel pivoted quickly, throwing a clip on screen from Tucker's Fox years, something meant to be humorous, a younger Carlson with a bow tie arguing with Jon Stewart. The crowd laughed, but Tucker didn't even look at the monitor. He stared directly at Jimmy. "You really enjoy mocking people who've changed, don't you?" he said. The audience laughter stuttered and stopped. Kimmel blinked. The energy shifted, just slightly, like the wind before a storm. And then a pause, long enough to feel deliberate, long enough to make the control room whisper. "Well," Jimmy finally said, trying for charm, "you make it kind of easy sometimes." Tucker didn't flinch. "Or maybe it's because it keeps the people who sign your checks happy." That wasn't a joke, that was a challenge, delivered not with aggression but with something more unnerving, certainty. The crowd didn't know whether to laugh. Some tried, but it didn't stick. Kimmel adjusted in his seat, glanced toward the teleprompter. The rhythm was breaking, and in that moment, brief, silent but electric, it became clear. This wasn't going to be a comedy segment. This was going to be something else entirely. First confrontation, approx 700 words. Kimmel leaned forward, smiling just enough to prove he wasn't rattled. "Look," he said, "I get it. You've got a new show now, you're doing the free speech renegade thing. But you do realize some of what you say sounds unhinged." Tucker tilted his head, just slightly. "To whom?" Kimmel gestured. Toward the crowd. Toward the invisible masses beyond the camera lens. To people with common sense. To people who believe facts still matter. The applause came, but it was hesitant. Something about the moment felt off. It wasn't landing the way Kimmel expected. He was doing his usual bit, position the guest as absurd, throw in a laugh line, and keep control. But Tucker didn't. Give him the expected reaction. No outrage, no defensiveness. Instead, Tucker smiled, not smugly, just calmly. "You used to believe in that too," he said. "Facts. But somewhere along the line you became part of the performance. It's not journalism. It's not even comedy anymore. It's theater for people who want to believe they're smarter than everyone else, even when they're not listening." That one landed. Kimmel sat back. The grin faltered. "Let me guess," Jimmy said, voice tightening. "This is the part where you tell me I'm controlled by the elites or something?" Tucker shook his head. "No. I think you're too smart to be controlled. I think you made a choice. You saw the game, and you decided to play it even if it meant being dishonest about who you were." That hit a nerve. Kimmel's voice dropped half an octave. "You don't know me." "I did," Tucker said almost gently. "We were on the same circuits. Remember that panel in 2004? You railed against corporate media for filtering truth through PR and ad dollars. You were furious, brilliant, honest, and now—" He trailed off. Kimmel looked away for the first time. "You think I've sold out?" he asked, half challenging. Tucker didn't answer right away. He let the silence do most of the work. "I think you stopped asking hard questions," he finally said, "because it's easier to mock people than to understand why they're angry." Now it was Kimmel who wasn't smiling. "You mean people like the ones who stormed the Capitol?" he snapped. Tucker's expression changed just slightly. His jaw tightened. But again, no explosion. "I mean people who've been ignored, lied to, told what to think by people who laugh at them from stages like this one," Tucker replied. The air grew heavier. You could feel the shift, not just on stage, but in the audience. This wasn't just a late-night spat anymore. It was becoming personal, philosophical. Kimmel tried to steer back. "So now you're their savior?" Tucker leaned forward. "No, but I won't pretend they don't exist. I won't pretend their anger isn't real. And I won't sit here and laugh while a man who used to speak truth to power now makes a living cozying up to it." The silence that followed was not awkward. It was devastating. Kimmel looked stunned, just for a second. Then he laughed, short, sharp, forced. "Wow," he said, shaking his head. "You really came here to deliver a monologue?" Tucker didn't move. "I came here hoping you'd still recognize truth when you heard it." That line didn't get applause. It got silence. Jimmy sat upright now, hands steepled in front of him like he was preparing for deposition, not comedy. Whatever friendly rhythm had existed between them had completely evaporated. The laugh lines were gone. No more cutaways to the band. No wink to the camera. This wasn't late night. This was something else. Something real. "You know," Jimmy began, voice low and deliberate, "I've sat across from a lot of people, on this couch, politicians, CEOs, actors who pretend they're smarter than they are. But you're something different. You're dangerous. Tucker didn't even blink. Because I disagree with you? No, Kimmel said, because you dress it up in reason. You say things calmly, convincingly, but it's poison, wrapped in charm. People listen to you and think it's truth. But it's just performance. Carlson leaned in now, not aggressively, but with an intensity that made everyone in the room lean too, just to keep up. Jimmy, he said, if this is a performance, why are you sweating? That one cut deep. Kimmel's jaw clenched. I'm sweating because I care. No, you're sweating because for the first time in a long time, someone's saying something you can't laugh off. And just like that, the power dynamic shifted. Carlson wasn't the interviewee anymore. He wasn't the punchline. He was the one driving the conversation, setting the tempo, making the host chase his own narrative. You once said comedy should punch up, Tucker continued, but now you punch laterally. Or down. You aim at people with no platform. You mock voters you've never met. You reduce their pain to sound bites, then cut to commercial. Kimmel tried to interrupt. I don't do that. But Tucker didn't let him finish. You called half the country idiots because they didn't vote how you wanted. You said democracy died when your side didn't win. You mourned truth when your candidates lost. That's not comedy. That's propaganda with a smile. The crowd was still, frozen. They weren't sure what show they were watching anymore. Jimmy tried to pivot. You talk about truth, but you've spun your own narratives too. You flirted with conspiracy, fanned flames during a pandemic, sowed doubt in elections. I asked questions, Tucker cut in. When asking questions became dangerous, that's when you should have spoken up, not me. For a second, Kimmel had nothing. Just breath. Just silence. Then, in a lower, more vulnerable voice, he said, You think I don't feel that? That I don't go home and wonder if I've lost something? It wasn't mockery. It wasn't deflection. It was real, and Tucker saw it. He softened. We all lose something in this business, he said, but the test is whether we notice, whether we care enough to look in the mirror and ask, what did I trade for this applause? And suddenly, it wasn't a debate. It was confession. Not one man to another, but one former truth-teller to another. Emotional unmasking, approximately 600 words. The energy in the room shifted again, this time more quietly. It wasn't about winning anymore. It was about exposure. And not the kind that gets headlines, the kind that leaves you breathless at 2 a.m. staring at your ceiling. Jimmy ran a hand through his hair. No script, no cue cards. He was off book now. He looked at Tucker not as a rival, not even as a threat, but as someone who knew something he didn't want to admit. You think I forgot where I came from? Jimmy said, more to the floor than to Tucker. But maybe you're right. I used to make fun of media. Now I am media. I used to go after hypocrisy. Now I avoid it. When it's mine. The audience wasn't clapping. They were listening. Do you know what it's like, Jimmy continued, to feel like you're boxed in by your own brand, to be expected to say the same things every night, laugh at the right people, mock the others, hit all the beats before the commercial break? Tucker nodded, slowly, not gloating and understanding. You don't have to do it, he said quietly. Jimmy looked up. Don't I? If I don't, someone else will. And then what? I lose the show, the crew, the house. You lose your voice, Tucker replied. And eventually you stop noticing. Jimmy leaned back again, slower this time. His body seemed heavier, more human. I used to believe in the truth, he said. Now I believe in trending segments, ratings, virality. Tucker didn't push. He waited. And then, as if all the years, all the masks, all the winks and sarcasm peeled away, Jimmy said something raw. I'm tired, man. It hung there. Not a punchline, not a comeback, just truth. Tucker looked at him, and then at the audience, who had seen something they weren't supposed to see, a moment that slipped past PR teams and network execs, a glimpse into the cost of being the joke every night, even when the laughter stopped. You're allowed to be, Tucker said, but you're not allowed to lie about it. Then he added softly, funny doesn't work when the pain leaks through the punchlines. Jimmy closed his eyes, just for a second, like he was trying to remember how he got here, and for once, There were no lights, no applause, just silence. The silence lingered longer than anyone expected, a stillness that couldn't be edited out, the kind that made even the crew stop moving. Jimmy's posture stiffened again. He shifted in his seat like his skin no longer fit. The crowd didn't know whether to clap, gasp, or pretend they hadn't just seen the host of a network late-night show confess to losing himself. He smiled, but it wasn't the real kind. It was the kind that hosts are trained to summon on cue, a smile like armor, a smile that says, "Everything's fine when everything's burning. Look, man," he said, forcing a light chuckle. "You come on my show, you try to shrink me down to some industry puppet, like I'm some sellout clown reading scripts from a teleprompter." Tucker didn't interrupt. He just watched, quiet, patient. "You don't know what it's like to carry the weight of this chair," Kimmel snapped, his voice rising. "The expectation, the pressure. People think it's just jokes, but it's a machine. Every second, every segment. And if I don't hit the beat, someone else will, someone less careful, someone who actually believes the garbage you're selling." There it was, the voice crack, just a trace, just enough to break through. "I'm not your enemy," Tucker said. But Jimmy wasn't listening anymore. "You come in here like some kind of truth prophet, but you left your own network under a pile of lawsuits and settlements. You pretend like you're above it all, but you were part of it, for years. You built your name on outrage. You don't get to walk away clean." His hand slammed the arm of the chair, lightly, but enough for the mic to pick it up. The audience stirred. This was no longer banter. This was exposure, a man unraveling in front of the very machine he once mastered. Jimmy stood up, only halfway, like he wasn't sure if he wanted to leave or take control back. His suit jacket wrinkled at the waist. The microphone on his lapel fluttered slightly as his breath quickened. He looked at the crowd, then at the cameras, then back at Tucker. And for the first time in the entire exchange, Jimmy looked small, not because he lacked power, but because all of it, and the lights, the cameras, the stage, couldn't protect him from truth anymore. Walk-off, final words, approximately 400 words. Tucker didn't gloat. He didn't smirk. He simply stood too, slowly, calmly, the way someone leaves a room not in victory, but in resolution. "I didn't come here to win," Tucker said. "I came here hoping you'd still remember who you were before all this." Jimmy's eyes narrowed, but he didn't respond, because he couldn't. The studio lights glared overhead. The floor director motioned toward the next segment, but nobody moved. No one rolled credits. No band kicked in. The silence remained, because the audience felt it too. Something unspoken had happened here. Not a segment, not a spat, but a reckoning. "You once told the truth when it wasn't easy," Tucker said, pausing at the edge of the stage. "You didn't care if it was popular. You cared if it was right, and people trusted you for that." He turned just before stepping off stage. "You can still be that guy, but not if you're too scared to piss off your own audience." That was the line. Not loud, not flashy, but final. The kind of line that stays with you long after the laughter fades. Kimmel sat down again, slowly. No words, no zingers. Just the faint hum of realization. He looked out over the crowd, eyes now wide, not from performance, but from something more sobering. Reflection. Tucker was gone. But the echo of that conversation lingered in the rafters like smoke, and for the first time in years, Jimmy Kimmel didn't have a joke to end the night. He just stared into the lens and blinked. Audience CTA, approx. 100 words. So, what do you think? Was this a long overdue wake-up call, or an ambush masked as truth? Did Tucker Carlson expose something real, or did he simply outplay a tired host in his own house? Let us know in the comments below. But keep it thoughtful, because moments like these deserve more than knee-jerk takes. Whose side are you on? And more importantly, who won? Subscribe if you haven't already, because this is just one of many moments where the mask slips and the truth gets through. And trust us, we're just getting started.